I gave my unemployed stepbrother a $15,000 check and a high-paying job offer. He called me a parasite, locked himself in the bathroom, and started a war against me that would nearly cost me everything. I always knew I wasn't the favorite growing up. And truthfully, I didn't mind. At least, that's what I told myself. Tyler, my stepbrother, had always been the golden boy. It didn't matter that he barely scraped through his classes or spent most nights sneaking out. Somehow, he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, every A- on my report card earned me a lecture about not reaching my potential. I learned early that expecting fairness was a waste of time. So I decided instead to become invisible, a ghost in my own home. Quiet, compliant, focused. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I planned to the future, while Tyler lived recklessly in the present. When I finally turned 18, I didn't throw a graduation party. I didn't even stay for cake. I packed my bags, signed a lease with the tiny savings I'd scraped together from part-time jobs, and walked away from that house like it was on fire. No one stopped me. No one even looked up. I thought I had finally escaped, until years later, Thanksgiving rolled around, and I made a decision that would come back to haunt me. By then, I had built a life for myself. A decent condo, a car that didn't break down twice a month, and a steady job at a mid-sized bank. I wasn't rich, but compared to where I'd come from, it felt like winning the lottery. Out of some mixture of guilt and leftover loyalty, I reached out that November. I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe we could start fresh. Stupid, right? I drove the 2 hours back to my hometown. The check for $15,000 folded neatly inside my jacket pocket. A lifeline if Tyler wanted it. And not just that, I also had a job lined up for him. A real one, entry-level at the bank. Something stable. Something he desperately needed. I figured offering an olive branch was a grown-up thing to do. Instead, I walked straight into a war zone. The first red flag was how much my parents had aged. My stepdad, Tom, looked tired in a way that went beyond wrinkles. And my mother, well, it was clear she had declared war on aging and was losing badly. Still, they hugged me like they meant it, poured me coffee, asked polite questions about my drive. For a moment, sitting there in that worn-out living room, I almost believed things could be normal, until Tyler slouched in from the kitchen, scratching his stomach and sneering at me like I was a roach under his shoe. I hadn't seen him in nearly 8 years, but somehow he looked exactly the same, just older, heavier, and meaner. "Look who decided to show up," he drawled, voice dripping with sarcasm. I ignored it. Focus on the mission. Help Tyler mend fences, move forward. When conversation turned to work, I casually mentioned the job opening at my bank. "Perfect for you," I said. "Steady pay, benefits, real room for growth." Tyler snorted. "Oh, wow. Look at Little Miss Banker. Bet you get paid just to sit around and push paper all day." My mother laughed, and Tom didn't even try to hide his smirk. Something inside me twisted, but still I smiled. Still, I pushed forward. I even handed Tyler the $15,000 check, told him to use it however he needed, rent, a car, even school if he wanted. He stared at the check for a long moment, and then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bet your deadbeat dad's rolling in his grave, seeing you sell yourself for a paycheck." The room went silent. I saw red. I stood so fast my chair nearly toppled over. My fists clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. Tyler, coward that he was, darted down the hallway and slammed himself into the bathroom, locking the door behind him. My parents sat frozen, pretending to be fascinated by a crack in the ceiling. I almost ripped the bathroom door clean off the hinges. Instead, I leaned against it and spoke in a voice so calm it scared even me. "Tyler," I said, "that job I was offering? Starting salary, 60 grand. Silence. But if you'd rather stay here jerking off in the shed you never moved out of while living off mommy and daddy like a parasite, hey, more power to you." Still silence. I could feel him on the other side of the door, seething. I could have kicked the door down. I could have demanded my check back. Instead, I left, walked out of that house without looking back. A small, bitter part of me thought, good riddance. Another, softer part whispered, you tried. You did more than he ever deserved. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. It was just the beginning. Because Tyler, miserable, petty, furious Tyler, wasn't done with me yet. He was just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. Even after locking my doors and windows, setting up motion alerts, and keeping my phone clutched in my hand, I couldn't stop imagining every sound outside as Tyler lurking, waiting. I knew the smart move would be to call the police immediately. But I also knew my mother. She would swoop in to defend Tyler, twist the situation into a family misunderstanding, and I'd be painted as a bad guy. Again, I needed more. I needed something Tyler couldn't talk his way out of. The next morning, I called Barbara, my best friend since college, the one person who always had my back. When I told her everything, she didn't hesitate. I'm coming over, she said. We're locking your life down tighter than Fort Knox. 3 hours later, Barbara showed up with a tote bag full of gadgets and snacks. We changed all my passwords again, encrypted my hard drives, set up new security alerts on my credit and banking accounts, and ran a full malware scan on every device. You're a freaking fortress now, she said, handing me a Diet Coke. It helped. A little. Still, the attacks kept coming. A few days later, a delivery guy buzzed my apartment at 9 p.m., holding 3 giant pizzas I never ordered. Another day, my building's maintenance office called. Someone had filed a complaint that my condo smelled like illegal substances. Meanwhile, my work email got flooded again, dozens of bogus complaints to my corporate ethics hotline, accusing me of everything from fraud to harassment. It was relentless. It was escalating. And it was all Tyler. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Barbara suggested going to the police again. You have enough now for a harassment report, she insisted. Even without the shed photos, the false complaints and stalking are enough. I hesitated. Once I involved the police, there would be no going back. Tyler would be forced to answer for everything, and so would my mother. Tom, too. It would explode everything. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing anymore. Maybe it was necessary. That night, I sat on my balcony staring up at the stars, phone in hand, ready to call the non-emergency police line. I was about to press the button when a new email popped up on my work laptop. Subject, urgent, credit fraud notice. My heart stopped. I clicked. It was a fraud alert from my credit card company. Someone had tried to open 3 new cards in my name that afternoon. I hadn't even seen the application notices yet. Tyler must have moved fast, using whatever scraps of information he'd stolen from old Christmas cards or online profiles. That was it. That was the last straw. I wasn't going to be the punching bag anymore. Early Saturday morning, I made the drive back to my hometown one more time, but not to my parents' house. Not yet. First, I needed to confirm one more thing. I stopped at the convenience store on the corner, the one where I'd seen Tyler buying beer and cigarettes before sneaking into the shed. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, Tyler appeared, shuffling down the sidewalk in the same grimy hoodie, hands shoved into his pockets. I stayed hidden behind a rack of firewood, heart hammering in my chest. He wasn't carrying anything this time, but instead of going into the store, he disappeared around the side of the building, toward the dumpsters. Curious, I edged closer, and that's when I saw it. Tyler pulling a crumpled envelope from his jacket and stuffing it into a crack between 2 broken pallets. It looked deliberate, like a dead drop. I waited until he was gone, then hurried over. Inside the envelope were printed sheets of paper, fake applications, bank statements, copies of old driver's licenses that weren't his. Some of them had my name on them. Others were fake names. He was planning something bigger than harassment. He was planning identity theft on a serious scale. Maybe not just against me. Maybe against other people too. I took photos of everything again, then carefully placed it all back exactly where I found it. If Tyler was dumb enough to think he was running some criminal empire out of a gas station dumpster, that was fine by me. More evidence. More rope to hang himself with. On the drive back to my city, I finally made up my mind. I wasn't just going to report Tyler for harassment. I was going to report him for attempted identity theft too. I had the shed evidence. I had the envelope evidence. I had the security footage from my condo. I had everything I needed to end this. And if it meant blowing up whatever tiny shred of family loyalty I had left, so be it. When I got home, I called Barbara. "I'm doing it," I said. "Good," she replied fiercely. "I'll help you get everything organized. Let's bury him." It felt cold. It felt brutal. But it also felt like survival. Tyler had picked the wrong person to mess with. Monday morning, I took the day off work and drove straight to the downtown police station. The folder in my passenger seat felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Every screenshot, every photograph, every printout of the credit fraud attempts. Barbara had helped me organize everything into labeled sections. "Treat it like a trial," she'd said. "Make it impossible for them to ignore." When I stepped up to the counter, I kept my voice steady. "I need to file a harassment and attempted identity theft report," I said. "My stepbrother has been targeting me." The woman at the desk blinked, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's get you set up with an officer." The interview room was smaller than I expected. No one-way mirrors, no bright light overhead, just a gray table, 2 chairs, and a bored-looking officer flipping open a notepad. "Walk me through it," he said. So I did. Everything. Thanksgiving. The check. The false HR complaints. The porn email subscriptions. The flyers. The packages. The shed. The envelope at the convenience store. I laid out every piece, every receipt, every blurry photo. I showed him screenshots of Tyler's Operation Payback list. I even handed over the USB drive Barbara had prepared, neatly labeled with timestamps and folder categories. When I finally finished, the officer sat back and whistled under his breath. "That's a lot," he said. "You're lucky you documented it so thoroughly. Most people don't." I didn't feel lucky. I felt exhausted. He explained that because Tyler hadn't physically harmed me or stolen anything yet, the case would initially be filed as harassment and attempted fraud. If he tried to open accounts in my name again and I could catch him, it would escalate to felony identity theft. He also suggested filing for a restraining order immediately. If he steps foot near your home or workplace after it's served, the officer said, "You call us. He'll be arrested on the spot." Hearing it said out loud made it real. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was criminal. When I got home that afternoon, the weight in my chest was still there, but lighter somehow. I wasn't powerless anymore. Tyler might have started this war, but I was going to finish it legally, cleanly, permanently. Of course, Tyler wasn't going to make it easy. The next morning, I woke up to find my car vandalized. Scratches deep into the paint, a broken side mirror, and scrawled across the windshield in red marker, "Rat." Classy. Building security had footage of him sneaking into the garage wearing a ski mask, but even without it, I would have known. The police added it to the case file. The restraining order paperwork was filed that same afternoon. That night, I sat on the couch with Barbara, nursing a glass of wine. "He's unraveling," she said, scrolling through the new security footage on my TV. "You pushed back, and now he's panicking." "Yeah," I said hollowly, "but panicking people are dangerous." Barbara didn't argue. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew it might get worse before it got better. And it did. A few days later, while I was at work, I got a frantic call from building security. "Miss Allen, there's a man here claiming he's your brother. He says he needs to get into your unit to retrieve some important documents." My heart nearly exploded out of my chest. "No," I said sharply. "Call the police immediately. He's violating a restraining order." They did. By the time I got home that evening, Tyler was already in custody, charged with trespassing and violation of a court order. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. Seeing the grainy security footage, Tyler standing at the front desk, disheveled and wild-eyed, trying to bluff his way into my life again, it made me realize just how far gone he was. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was obsessed. The officer handling my case called later that night. "Good news and bad news," he said. "The good news, he's being held overnight. Judge wants to see him first thing in the morning. And the bad? I asked. He's not exactly remorseful. He's telling anyone who will listen that you're ruining his life, that you owe him. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. Of course he was. The next few days passed in a haze of adrenaline. I updated my building's management. I doubled my home security. I checked every lock twice. I changed my route to work every morning. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be afraid of someone you used to trust. Meanwhile, my mother kept calling. I ignored every call. Ignored the texts too. Long, guilt-tripping paragraphs about family loyalty and how could you do this to your own brother? It was amazing how quickly your stepbrother's trouble turned into you're tearing this family apart once consequences started landing. I knew better than to engage. I didn't owe her anything. Not explanations. Not forgiveness. Not anymore. By the end of the week, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Restraining order finalized. The officer said, effective immediately. He comes within 500 feet of you. He goes straight to jail. It should have been a relief. And yet all I felt was cold, bitter exhaustion, like surviving a hurricane only to realize the wreckage was still everywhere around you. I didn't hear from Tyler for almost a month after that. No emails, no packages, no graffiti, no police reports. It was like he'd fallen off the face of the earth. I started to breathe again. Started to believe maybe, just maybe, it was over. Until one afternoon, when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something, gut instinct, bad luck, whatever you want to call it, made me pick up. Is this Alexander Allen? Yes, who's calling? This is Patricia from Westside Hospital. We have your stepbrother Tyler here, in the emergency room. You're listed as his emergency contact. The world tilted sideways. Emergency contact? I hadn't listed Tyler as anything in years. Then I remembered, when we were kids, there was a form at school. Emergency contacts, siblings first. He must have kept my name on file somewhere. Or maybe my mom had. Is he okay? I asked, heart-thudding. He's stable, Patricia said, but he's been in an accident. He asked for you. I didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or hang up. Instead, I said the only thing I could. I'm on my way. The drive to Westside Hospital felt like moving underwater. Every stoplight stretched on forever. Every mile crawled by. I kept telling myself it was probably nothing serious. That Tyler would be fine. That this wasn't another one of his setups. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a game anymore. When I finally reached the emergency room, the smell hit me first. Antiseptic, overcooked cafeteria food, the faint coppery tang of blood. The nurse at the front desk glanced up as I approached. Alexander Allen? Yes. She gave me a tired smile. Your stepbrother is stable. Room 3B, down the hall on the left. I followed the signs, heart hammering against my ribs. Tyler looked small. There was no other word for it. He lay on the hospital bed, his right arm encased in a clunky cast, a deep gash across his forehead held together by ugly black stitches. He was pale, thinner than I remembered, and somehow older, like the months of stress had carved permanent lines into his face. When he saw me, he blinked like he couldn't quite believe I was real. You came, he rasped. I hovered by the door, not moving closer. Patricia said you asked for me. He gave a weak half-smile. Yeah, guess I figured. If anyone showed up, it'd be you. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. The nurse popped in a moment later, checking his vitals and confirming he'd be kept overnight for observation. Tyler didn't have insurance, of course. When they asked who would handle the paperwork, he just looked at me helplessly. I sighed and nodded. I'll do it, because that's who I was, even after everything. The fool who couldn't leave a drowning man to sink, even if he'd tried to pull me under with him. Once the nurse left, Tyler fidgeted with the hem of his blanket. I'm sorry, he said. So quietly I almost missed it. I didn't answer. I just waited. For the stuff I did, he continued, not meeting my eyes. The flyers, the emails, the everything. I crossed my arms. And he swallowed. And for blaming you. For thinking it was your fault my life sucked. It wasn't. I stayed silent, letting him twist in the discomfort of his own confession. Finally, he slumped back against the pillows. I didn't know how to be anything else, he muttered. They made it so easy to hate you. I thought if I could just knock you down a few pegs, maybe I'd feel better about myself. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was more honesty than Tyler had ever offered me in his life. I stared at him, this broken, battered version of the boy who had once pulled my pigtails and called me names at the dinner table, and felt an unexpected wave of sadness. He was still an idiot, still dangerous in ways he didn't even understand. But he wasn't a monster. Not completely. Just a man who never grew up, who never figured out how to take the pain he was given and do something useful with it. You have a lot to fix, I said, voice flat. I know. Not just with me. With yourself. With Mom. With Tom. With your life. He nodded, grimacing as the movement tugged at his stitches. I want to, he said. I just don't know how. I believed him. And I also knew it wasn't my job to teach him. After filling out the billing forms and putting them under my name, because what else could I do? I returned to Tyler's room. He was asleep, snoring softly. I stood there for a long moment, watching him. Maybe part of me hoped he would wake up changed, rewired, fixed. But real life isn't a fairy tale. People don't heal just because you want them to. They have to want it themselves. I left without waking him. The next few days passed in a weird, limbo-like state. I went back to work, answered emails, smiled through meetings, all while waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because Tyler wasn't good at gratitude. He was good at resentment. And I didn't know which version of him would show up next. Then, a week later, there was a knock at my door. I checked the camera before opening it. Always now. Always. Tyler stood there, arm in a sling, dressed in jeans and a button-up that looked suspiciously new. He shifted nervously from foot to foot. I opened the door, leaving the chain latched. What do you want? Just to talk, he said. Not crazy talk. Normal talk. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He didn't sit down. Didn't make himself at home. Just stood there, wringing his hands. I got a job, he blurted. 2, actually. Morning shifts at a warehouse. Evenings at a gas station. Neither glamorous. Neither permanent. But work. Real work. I raised an eyebrow. Why tell me? Because you're the only one who ever expected anything more from me, he said, voice cracking slightly. And because I need to make this right. He pulled an envelope from his back pocket and handed it to me. Inside was a wad of cash. Not a lot. Maybe a few $100s. But it was something. I can't pay you back all at once, he said, voice low. But I'm going to. Every cent. I stared at the envelope. It wasn't about the money. It was about the gesture. The fact that for the first time in his life, Tyler was choosing responsibility over excuses. Keep it, I said, handing it back. Put it toward your rent, or food, or whatever else you need to stay afloat. He shook his head. I need to do this. For me, there was a quiet desperation in his voice that hadn't been there before. So I nodded, and for the first time since Thanksgiving, I allowed myself to hope. One condition, I said as he turned to leave. He looked back, wary. You keep your promises, I said. No more games. No more lies. No more screwing yourself over just because it's easier than trying. He gave a shaky laugh. Deal. As the door clicked shut behind him, I slumped onto the couch, heart racing. Maybe it would blow up in my face. Maybe it was all an act. But for the first time in months, I felt something dangerous and beautiful bloom in my chest. Hope. The weeks after Tyler's visit were the quietest my life had been in years. No anonymous calls. No fake packages. No harassment. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could walk through my condo lobby without wondering who was watching me. I could sleep through the night without checking my front door camera every hour. It wasn't normal yet. Not completely. But it was peaceful. And after everything that had happened, peace felt like a luxury I wasn't used to. Tyler kept his word. Every other week, he dropped off a small envelope of cash, always without fanfare, always without trying to come inside. Sometimes we barely said more than a few words. Sometimes he asked if I needed anything. Groceries carried upstairs, heavy boxes moved. It was awkward, stiff, but it was real. A slow, painful process of him trying to dig his way out of the hole he'd spent years throwing himself into. And me, learning how to cautiously trust that he might actually want to climb. Then, 3 weeks after his hospital discharge, I got a text from my mother. Mom, family dinner at our house Sunday. We'd like you to come. Please. Just 6 words. Simple, ordinary. But seeing them made my stomach twist into a knot. I stared at my phone for a long time, weighing every possibility. Was this a trap? A guilt ambush? Some misguided attempt at forced reconciliation? Or, crazy as it sounded, was it genuine? Had they actually changed? I decided I had nothing to lose. Worst case, I'd have a story to tell Barbara over drinks. Best case, maybe something was different. Maybe I was different. Maybe I could face them now without shrinking into the kid who never measured up. Sunday afternoon, I made the drive back to my childhood home. The second I pulled onto their street, old instincts kicked in, heart racing, hands tightening on the wheel. But I forced myself to breathe through it. This time was different. This time, I had power too. The house looked the same. Peeling paint, sagging gutters. But something in the atmosphere felt different. Lighter, somehow. When my mom answered the door, she smiled nervously and pulled me into a brief hug. Tom waved from the kitchen, where he was slicing vegetables with surprising gentleness. Tyler was already at the table, looking awkward in a clean shirt and combed hair. It was almost surreal. Dinner was weird, polite, tentative. No shouting matches. No passive-aggressive jabs. Just careful small talk about work, weather, local news. I kept waiting for the explosion, the snide comment, the fight. It didn't come. Instead, halfway through the meal, Tom cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, he said gruffly. The table went silent. Tom never apologized. Not when he snapped at me as a kid. Not when he ignored my graduations. Not when he let Tyler bully me under his nose. But now, he set down his fork and looked me square in the eye. I didn't handle things right, he said. I should have treated you better. Should have expected more of Tyler, not less. My mother nodded, tears shining in her eyes. We thought we were protecting him, she said quietly. But all we were doing was crippling him. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, but didn't deny it. I didn't know what to say. Forgiveness wasn't automatic. It wasn't even easy. But hearing the words, the real, honest words, loosened something in my chest that had been tangled for years. We talked for hours after dinner. About the past. About how things had gone so wrong. About how hard it was and still is to unlearn bad patterns. Tom admitted he'd started therapy a year ago after a health scare forced him to confront his anger issues. My mom admitted she'd been seeing someone too, learning how to set real boundaries instead of pretending problems didn't exist. And Tyler admitted he was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of backsliding. Scared of not knowing who he was without the anger. I don't know if I can stay on the right path, he said, voice raw. You don't have to know, I said before I could stop myself. You just have to keep choosing it. By the time I left that night, I felt like I had stepped into some alternate version of my life. One where apologies were real. One where healing was possible. It didn't erase the past. It didn't fix everything. But it was a start. And for once, a start felt like enough. The next few months passed in cautious steps forward. Tyler kept working both jobs. Eventually, he saved enough to rent a room in a house across town. Not glamorous, but is. He opened a checking account. Started paying off his old fines. Even began studying for his GED. We met for coffee every few weeks, sometimes talking about work, sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. It wasn't a sibling relationship we might have had in a perfect world, but it was something real. And through it all, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Tyler to snap, for my parents to backslide, for everything to shatter again, because that was what I was used to, disappointment. But it didn't happen. Not yet, anyway. One evening, as we sat at a coffee shop halfway between my condo and his new place, Tyler said something that caught me off guard. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee absently, "for a long time, I thought you left because you hated us." I looked up sharply. "I didn't leave because I hated you," I said slowly. "I left because I had survived." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I get that now," he said. Took me a while. It was the first time he had acknowledged it out loud. The truth we both had always known, but never dared to say. That sometimes survival meant walking away from the people you loved, even if it broke your heart. As I drove home that night, I realized something strange and bittersweet. Maybe we weren't rebuilding the old family. Maybe we were building a new one, from scratch, one coffee meetup at a time. Spring melted into early summer, and life settled into something that felt almost normal. For the first time in years, my world wasn't defined by fear or anger. I wasn't dodging harassment emails or replacing key car doors. I wasn't looking over my shoulder at work, wondering if Tyler would try to ruin me again. Instead, I was getting text updates about GED practice tests and Tyler's new favorite brand of work boots. It felt strange, like living inside someone else's life, but in the best way possible. Then one Thursday afternoon, Tyler texted me. "Tyler, coffee this weekend? Need to tell you something." I stared at the message for a second, my mind automatically bracing for bad news. Old habits die hard. But then I forced myself to relax. He hadn't given me a reason to doubt him, not recently. We met at our usual spot on Saturday morning. When I arrived, Tyler was already sitting at a corner table, nervously peeling the label off a water bottle. He looked different now, still rough around the edges, but steadier somehow, like someone who was figuring out how to stand on his own 2 feet. "I got promoted," he blurted the second I sat down. I blinked. "Wait, seriously?" He grinned sheepishly. "Yeah, shift supervisor at the warehouse. It's not a huge deal, but it's a step." "A huge deal is relative," I said, grinning back. "I'm proud of you." His smile faltered slightly. "There's more." He reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope. Deja vu washed over me. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was hope. Inside the envelope was a check, made out to me, for $15,000. The exact amount I had given him at Thanksgiving. "I've been saving," he said quickly, as if afraid I'd cut him off. "Living cheap, banking everything extra. I still need to pay you back for the hospital bill too, but I wanted to get this part done first." I stared at the check, feeling my throat tighten. "You didn't have to do this," I said softly. "I know," Tyler replied, "but I needed to. For me, there was a time, not long ago, when I would have thought this was just another manipulation tactic. But not today. Today, it felt real, honest, earned. I'm not cashing this right away," I said, slipping the envelope into my bag carefully. Tyler frowned. "Why not?" "Because," I said, smiling, "you've already paid me back where it mattered." He looked confused, but I didn't explain further. Some things you don't need to spell out. Some things you just feel. We talked for another hour, making tentative plans for the future. Tyler had big goals now. Getting his GED, maybe taking night classes at the community college. He even mentioned a dream of getting into banking one day, following my footsteps, in his own way. It wasn't just talk. For the first time, he had action behind his words. That night, as I filed the check carefully away in my safe, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a series of choices. Small ones. Every time I chose to believe he could do better. Every time I chose to meet him for coffee, instead of shutting the door. Every time I chose to listen, instead of walking away. I was choosing forgiveness. And in doing so, I was freeing myself too. 2 weeks later, another surprise landed in my inbox. An official email from my bank's HR department. Subject, internal candidate referral, Tyler M. I stared at the screen, rereading it twice. Apparently, Tyler had listed me as his reference when he applied for an entry-level position at the downtown branch. He hadn't even asked me first. Hadn't begged or guilt or manipulated. He had just tried. I thought about it for a long time before responding. In the end, I told the truth. That Tyler had once struggled, that he had made mistakes, but that over the past year, he had proven himself hardworking, dedicated, and serious about changing his life. It was risky. It was terrifying, but it was right. 2 weeks later, he got the job. When Tyler texted me the news, all capital letters, way too many exclamation points, I laughed out loud for the first time in what felt like forever. Tyler, I got it. I start Monday. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I typed back quickly. Me, you did this yourself. I'm just proud of you. Because it was true. He had earned it. Every bit of it. The weekend before his first day, Tyler invited me, Mom, and Tom out to dinner. It was the first time the four of us had been together in public in years. I was nervous, wary, ready to bolt at the first sign of old patterns. But it wasn't like before. Tom was quieter now, still blunt, but not cruel. Mom was softer, more present. And Tyler was someone I barely recognized, in the best possible way. Confident, hopeful, proud. Halfway through dinner, Tyler raised his glass of water. I just want to say thanks, he said, looking around the table, for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. Mom teared up immediately. Tom cleared his throat gruffly. And me? I smiled, not because everything was perfect, not because the past was erased, but because we had survived it. Together. When I drove home that night, I realized something. I wasn't carrying them anymore. I wasn't dragging their mistakes behind me like a ball and chain. They were standing on their own now, and I was free to move forward wherever I wanted to go. For the first few weeks after Tyler started his new job, everything was almost suspiciously perfect. He texted me updates after every shift. Survived my first day. Didn't screw up balancing the drawer. Boss said I'm a fast learner. I tried not to hover or micromanage. This was his win, not mine. Still, part of me kept bracing for something to go wrong. Not because I didn't believe in him, but because believing in someone doesn't erase their past mistakes. And Tyler's past was long, messy, and stubborn. At first, it seemed like my fears were unfounded. He showed up on time, learned quickly, kept his head down. Co-workers liked him. Customers liked him. Even his supervisor emailed me privately to say, "You were right. He's rough around the edges, but he's one of the hardest workers we have." I was cautiously thrilled. Maybe, just maybe, Tyler was going to make it. Then, about 6 weeks in, Tyler texted me. "Tyler, can we meet? Need advice. Urgent." My stomach dropped. Urgent never meant good. I told him to meet me at our usual coffee shop the next morning. He showed up looking exhausted, like he hadn't slept all night. The second he sat down, he blurted it out. "I messed up." I froze. "What happened?" He scrubbed a hand over his face. "A customer left a deposit bag on the counter. I didn't see it. Didn't log it. It's missing." Missing, as in possibly stolen, as in potentially a fireable offense, as in worst case scenario. "Did you take it?" I asked quietly. He looked genuinely horrified. "No, I swear, I didn't even know it was there." I believed him. But belief wasn't going to save his job. Facts would. "What have you done about it?" I asked. He slumped. I reported it the second I realized. Filed an incident report. Told my manager everything. "Good," I said firmly. "That's the only thing you could have done." He nodded miserably. "They're pulling security footage. I guess we'll see what it shows." We sat in silence for a while. Tyler fidgeted with his coffee cup, chewing his lip raw. Finally, he said, "I feel like one screw-up, and everyone's just waiting to toss me out." I met his eyes across the table. "Then don't give them a reason to," I said. "You made a mistake. You owned it. Now you prove you're worth believing in." It wasn't a magic fix. It wasn't a pep talk. It was reality. And to his credit, Tyler didn't argue. The next 3 days were agonizing. He was suspended pending investigation. No pay, no access to the building. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped into my throat. Finally, Thursday afternoon, I got the text. Tyler, cleared. The cameras showed another customer picked up the deposit bag by accident. They found it. I'm reinstated. I let out a shaky breath. I hadn't even realized I was holding. Me, proud of you for handling it right. Tyler, wouldn't have without you. It was a small crisis, a near miss, but it taught both of us something important. Redemption isn't one grand gesture. It's 1,000 small choices. Doing the right thing when no one's looking. Owning your mistakes instead of running from them. Facing your own fear and refusing to let it define you. After the incident, something shifted between me and Tyler. The old unease, the lingering what-ifs, began to fade for real, not because he became perfect, but because he proved he was capable of growing, of choosing differently. Summer faded into fall, and Tyler kept building. He passed his GED exams, moved into a tiny studio apartment, enrolled in 2 night classes at the local community college. Sometimes we met for coffee to celebrate small wins. Sometimes we just texted memes back and forth at midnight like dumb teenagers. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. It was real, and it was enough. One Saturday in late October, Tyler surprised me again. We met for coffee, and after a few minutes of small talk, he pulled a card out of his jacket pocket. A simple, cheap greeting card. Inside, scrawled in messy handwriting, was one sentence. Thanks for believing in me when I gave you every reason not to. No money, no flashy gestures. Just a few honest words that meant more than any check ever could. I smiled across the table. You don't owe me anything, I said. He shook his head. I know. That's why it matters. And for once, I believed him completely. It wasn't about owing. It was about choosing. Choosing to be better. Choosing to show up. Choosing to fight for a future instead of clinging to the past. As I left the coffee shop that afternoon, card tucked safely into my bag, I realized something else. Tyler wasn't the only one who had changed. I had too. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means remembering and still choosing to move forward anyway. One shaky, stubborn step at a time. The holidays crept up faster than I expected that year. One minute I was swapping work emails about end-of-year reports, and the next, I was standing in the baking aisle at the grocery store, debating which kind of cookie mix would impress my mom the most. It was the first Christmas I was actually invited home without guilt trips or backhanded comments attached. Just an honest, simple invitation. We'd love to have you here if you want to come. No expectations. No manipulation. The choice was mine. And this time, I chose yes. Christmas Eve at my parents' house was surprisingly normal. Tyler was already there when I arrived, setting out plates on the dining table, dressed in a decent sweater that actually fit. Mom hovered around the kitchen, humming Christmas carols under her breath. Tom was in the living room, fiddling with the fire. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, clumsy apologies half swallowed, moments when the old tension tried to creep back in, but there was also laughter, real, genuine laughter. And for the first time in my life, it didn't feel forced. It felt earned. After dinner, we exchanged gifts, nothing fancy, just thoughtful little things. A coffee mug Tyler had hand-painted at a local pottery studio. A photo frame from my mom with a picture of the 4 of us from Thanksgiving. Smiling. Actually smiling without any hidden knives behind our backs. It felt surreal. In a good way. Later, when the dishes were done and the wine was flowing, Tyler pulled me aside. We sat on the back porch, bundled in jackets against the cold. You know, he said, staring up at the night sky, there were a lot of times I thought about giving up. I didn't say anything, just waited. After everything that happened, the restraining order, the cops, the hospital, I really thought maybe I was just broken, beyond fixing. He kicked at a loose piece of gravel with his boot. But then I kept thinking about how you still showed up. At the hospital. At court. even when I didn't deserve it. He turned to look at me, his breath fogging in the cold. I realized maybe you weren't showing up because you thought I deserved saving. Maybe you were showing up because you believed I could save myself. I blinked hard, the sting behind my eyes catching me off guard. Yeah, I said roughly. That's exactly it. We sat in silence for a while after that. No big emotional speeches. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just two people, siblings, family, finally understanding each other for the first time. That night, driving back to my condo, I realized something else. Healing isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It's not fireworks and applause and life-altering declarations. It's small, quiet, 1,000 tiny choices to do better day after day. And somehow, against all odds, we had made those choices. Together, the new year came and went. Tyler settled into his bank job, eventually moving up to a full-time position on the personal banking team. He still had bad days, still struggled sometimes with doubt, anger, shame. But he faced them now instead of running. And every time he got knocked down, he stood up a little faster, a little stronger. I kept living my life too, got promoted at work, started volunteering at a local mentorship program for at-risk teens, even dipped a cautious toe back into dating. Barbara approved every date with FBI-level background checks, of course. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, better than I ever thought it could be. One afternoon in late spring, Tyler and I met up for coffee like we always did. He slid an envelope across the table. Old habit at this point. Inside was a check for the remainder of the hospital bill I'd paid when he had no insurance. Every cent down to the dollar. Debt-free, he said, grinning. From me, anyway. I teased. He laughed. Yeah. Still got student loans now. Thanks for that, by the way, he added with a mock glare. I raised my coffee cup in salute. Welcome to adulthood. Before we left, Tyler paused by the door. You know, he said casually, I'm thinking about applying for the management trainee program next year. I stared. You absolutely should. He looked almost shy. You think I'd have a shot? I didn't hesitate. I think you'd kill it. His grin could have lit up the whole coffee shop. Watching him walk away that day, I felt a deep, quiet pride, not because he had paid me back, not because he had gotten a job or passed his GED or pulled his life together, but because he had become the kind of person who wanted to, someone who chose growth over resentment, action over excuses, hope over fear. And me, I had learned that setting boundaries didn't make me cruel, that protecting myself didn't mean abandoning people, that forgiveness could be powerful, but only when it was given freely, not demanded. As I drove home, windows down, spring breeze filling the car, I realized something. The family I had fought for, the love, the respect, the connection, it hadn't come the way I imagined as a kid. It didn't come through begging or pleasing or being perfect. It came through hard choices, hard conversations, hard-won trust, built piece by piece, one shaky step at a time. And in the end, it was worth every single one.